Morocco and Beverly Leidick.
Good morning. This is Beverly Leidick, and I'll be reading to you today from the Omaha World Herald.
And I'm Ralph Morocco with the Lincoln Journal-Star. We'll begin with news from Trump transition team. The most influential national security job is the still-forming Trump administration will likely go to a retired three-star general who helped dismantle insurgent networks in Afghanistan and Iraq, but then surprised and sometimes dismayed colleagues by joining the political insurgency led by Donald Trump. As National Security Advisor to Trump, retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn would be responsible for helping a president with no national security experience navigate complicated global issues, including the unfinished campaign against the Islamic State, the expansionist agenda of China, and rising aggression from Russia. Flynn's selection for the post was confirmed Thursday night by a person close to the Trump transition team who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss internal conversations. As a decorated military intelligence officer and former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Flynn has deep experience to draw upon as he serves as Trump's principal point of contact with the State Department, the Pentagon, and a collection of U.S. intelligence agencies that have surged in power and influence since the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. This is a guy who has the president's trust, has credentials with the military, has credentials with the Intelligence Committee, and credibility with Congress, said Representative Devin Nunes, a Republican from California and chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and a member of the Trump transition team. He's a very serious person. He takes his job very seriously. But Flynn has also shown an erratic streak since leaving government that is likely to make his elevation disconcerting even to the flag officers and senior intelligence officials who once considered him a peer. Flynn stunned former colleagues when he traveled to Moscow last year to appear alongside Russian President Vladimir Putin at a lavish gala for the Kremlin-run propaganda channel RT. A trip Flynn admitted he was paid to make and defended by saying he saw no distinction between RT and U.S. news channels such as CNN. Flynn said he used the trip to press Putin's government to behave more responsibly in international affairs. Former U.S. officials said Flynn, seen dining next to Putin in photos published by Russian propaganda outlets, was used as a prop by the autocratic leader. Flynn was forced out of his job as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency in 2014 over concerns about his leadership style. After the ouster, he frequently lashed out in public against President Barack Obama and blamed his removal on the administration's discomfort with his hardline views on radical Islam. Spurning the decorum traditionally expected of retired U.S. flag officers, Flynn became a fervent campaigner for Trump and was given a high-profile role speaking before the GOP convention, an appearance in which he led the crowd in lock-her-up chants against Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. Flynn's behavior drew the ire of former colleagues and superiors, including retired General Stanley McChrystal, who made Flynn his top intelligence officer during critical stretches of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. McChrystal and retired Admiral Michael Mullen, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, contacted Flynn and urged him to show more restraint, with Mullen warning that Flynn's behavior could jeopardize White House trust in the military. Flynn dismissed those concerns in an interview with the Washington Post earlier this year, saying efforts to quiet him impinged on his free speech rights. When someone says you're a general, so you have to shut up, he said. I do say, do I have to stop being an American? Flynn continued to campaign for Trump and has said he has admired the mogul since the initial meeting. I was very impressed, Flynn said in an interview with the Post. Very serious guy, good listener, asked really good questions. I found him to be very attuned to what was going on around the world.
If humanity survives the rise of an artificial intelligence, the ravages of climate change, and the threat of nuclear terrorism in the next century, we aren't home free, according to Stephen Hawking. The renowned theoretical physicist has gone as far as providing humanity with a deadline for finding another planet to colonize. We have 1,000 years. Remaining on Earth any longer, Hawking believes, places humanity at great risk of encountering another mass extinction. We must continue to go into space for the future of humanity, the 74-year-old Cambridge professor said during a speech this week at Oxford University. I don't think we will survive another 1,000 years without escaping beyond our fragile planet, he said. Hawking told the audience that Earth's cataclysmic end might be hastened by humankind, which will continue to devour the planet's resources at unsustainable rates. Though the challenges ahead are immense, Hawking said, it is a glorious time to be alive and doing research into theoretical physics. Our picture of the universe has changed a great deal in the last 50 years, and I am happy if I have made a small contribution, he added. The key to leaving the planet behind, he noted, was surviving the precarious century ahead. Although the chance of a disaster to planet Earth in a given year may be quite low, it adds up over time and becomes a near certainty in the next 1,000 or 10,000 years. By that time, we should have spread out into space and to other stars, so a disaster on Earth would not mean the end of the human race, he said. Since 2009, NASA has been hunting for Earth-like planets with the potential for human colonization. Researchers have discovered more than 4,600 candidate planets and an additional 2,300 or so confirmed planets, according to the agency. The first exoplanet orbiting another star like our sun was discovered in 1995, according to NASA. Exoplanets, especially small Earth-sized worlds, belong within the realm of science fiction just 21 years ago. Today, and thousands of discoveries later, astronomers are on the cusp of finding something people have dreamt about for thousands of years. Before we have a chance to relocate, Hawking said, we'll first need to solve the potential threat caused by technology. While Hawking thinks technology has the capacity to ensure mankind's survival, previous statements suggest that the cosmologist is simultaneously grappling with the potential threat it poses. When it comes to discussing that threat, Hawking is unmistakably blunt. I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race, Hawking told the BBC in a 2014 interview that touched upon everything from online privacy to his affinity for his robotic-sounding voice. Despite its current usefulness, he cautioned, further developing artificial intelligence could prove a fatal mistake. Once humans develop artificial intelligence, it will take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate, Hawking has warned in recent months. Humans who are limited by slow biological evolution couldn't compete and would be superseded.
From Washington, the Republican-led House has acted decisively to bar the sale of commercial aircraft to Iran, a move that would scuttle deals already authorized by the Obama administration and potentially worth billions of dollars. By 243 to 174 vote on Thursday, lawmakers passed legislation that would prohibit the Treasury Department from issuing the licenses U.S. banks would need to complete the transactions. The House bill seeks to counter the department's decision in September to grant aviation giants Boeing and Airbus permission to sell the passenger planes to Tehran. The bill must now clear the Senate, where the measure would face stiff opposition from Democrats. President Barack Obama would veto the bill if it reached his desk, according to the White House. The proposed sale may involve the purchase and leasing of more than 200 aircraft, which would generate thousands of new jobs, according to Democrats who opposed the legislation. Republicans, however, decried the sale of aircraft to a country they say is the leading state sponsor of terrorism and has flouted United Nations resolutions by testing ballistic missiles. UN's nuclear deal, US and other world powers, ended international economic sanctions against Tehran and specifically allowed for the sale of commercial aircraft and spare parts. The Treasury Department said the licenses granted to Boeing and Airbus contain strict conditions to ensure the planes will be used exclusively for commercial passenger use and cannot be resold or transferred to a designated entity. But Representative Peter Roskam, a Illinois Republican, called the aircraft sales a scandal. He harshly criticized Boeing and Airbus for seeking to do business with Iran. We need to make sure that the American financial system is not complicit in this deal, Roskam said. We need to make sure that American taxpayers are not subsidizing this deal. Although Roskam is from Illinois, where Boeing is headquartered, the airplanes the company proposed selling to Iran are built in Washington state. Democrats cast the legislation as another Republican attempt to undermine last year's Iran nuclear agreement and embarrass the Obama administration. Representative Jim Himes, a Connecticut Democrat and member of the House Intelligence Committee, said the bill plunged the House again into the dreary and dangerous ritual of considering a measure that would cause the United States to violate the nuclear accord that took years to forge with world powers, including China and Russia.
The U.S. divorce rate has fallen for the third consecutive year to its lowest level in more than 35 years, according to data released Thursday. Meanwhile, marriage is up a bit, at 32.3 marriages for every 1,000 unmarried women aged 15 or older last year, from 31.9 in 2014. It was the highest since 2009, suggesting that after a plunge of several decades, matrimony could be stabilizing. The decline has stopped, said Wendy Manning, co-director for the National Center for Family and Marriage Research at Bowling Green State University. Every year, the center uses census data to calculate the previous year's marriage and divorce trends. This year's calculations show that divorce has been dropping quickly to a rate of 16.9, down from 17.6 in 2014, and a peak of almost 23 in 1980. It's hard to know exactly why divorce is in decline. Factors could include the aging of the U.S. population, changing gender roles, and the fact that there are few marriages to break up in the first place. The decline in year-to-year divorce statistics doesn't necessarily mean any more marriage is more likely to last. Baby boomers, for example, married young and have continued marrying and divorcing even at older ages. It isn't clear yet whether millennials and Generation X will follow suit. Look at the marriage rate. One reason it has fallen so steeply over the decades is that these younger generations have pushed getting married further into adulthood. Many sociologists believe the typical marriage today still has about a 50-50 probability of lasting, the same chance it had decades ago. We've seen a decline of divorce among people who are younger and an increase among people who are older, Manning said.
From Chicago, workers at O'Hare International Airport here are threatening to strike during the busy Thanksgiving travel week to draw attention to their fight for a $15 hourly wage and what they feel are shoddy working conditions. Airplane cabin cleaners, baggage handlers, janitors, and wheelchair assistants who are not in a union but are being organized by Service Employees International Union Local Number 1 took a strike vote over the past 2 days. Of the 500 votes cast, all but one were in favor of the strike, said union spokesman Isabella Mitko-Ivkovic. There are 2,000 workers in those positions at O'Hare, she said. Tom Balanoff, president of SEIU Local Number 1, said the workers who plan to picket outside the airport and walk through the terminals don't expect to shut down the airport, though it will cause some disruption, no doubt. And from Minneapolis, when Philando Castile was shot by a Minnesota police officer, his girlfriend broadcast his final moments live on Facebook. But experts say the footage from a squad car camera was probably a bigger factor in prosecutors' decision to charge the officer with manslaughter. And that footage, which is still no guarantee that Geronimo Yanez will be convicted, as other police shootings have shown. There have been cases that had video that resulted in either an acquittal or a hung jury. So sometimes the video may raise more questions, said Philip Stinson, a criminologist at Bowling Green State University who tracks fatal police shootings. Since the beginning of 2005, a total of 78 officers in the U.S. have been charged with murder or manslaughter. Of those, about a third of the defendants were convicted.
Vice President-elect Mike Pence told House Republicans in a closed-door meeting Thursday to be ready to move a lot of legislation next year. We're going to move an agenda focused on rebuilding the military and improving the economy, Pence told reporters after the meeting. In his remarks to House Republicans, Pence talked about how he and the new administration wanted members to buckle up and get ready for a speedy start on policy. He also solicited suggestions for candidates to fill administrative posts. Donald Trump is a man of action, and we're counting on you, Pence said, according to Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady. The Texas Republican said that Pence mentioned a tax overhaul and the Affordable Care Act, but didn't get into specifics. Pence's closed-door meeting with Speaker Paul Ryan and other House Republicans reflected his vital role helping Trump forge a relationship with Congress. His visit was squeezed in even as Pence is overseeing the building of a Trump administration. After the House meeting, Pence met with House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer, the newly elected leader of the Senate Democrats, seeking to convey respect as Democrats prepare for Republican rule of both chambers and the White House for the first time in a decade. We look forward to finding ways that we can find common ground and move the country forward, Pence said outside Schumer's Senate office. In his meeting with the House GOP, Pence didn't mention Trump's campaign promise to build a wall on the Mexican border, according to Representative Lou Barletta of Pennsylvania. But Pence said the transition is going fantastic and that Trump is methodically selecting his cabinet positions, Barletta said. Representative Chris Collins of New York, who was appointed by the transition team as its congressional liaison, said Pence also told lawmakers that one of Trump's top priorities was taking a deep dive through President Barack Obama's executive orders. We applaud that, he said. He will be reversing many of them. Pence was introduced at the meeting by Ryan, who noted the vice president-elect was very much at home given his House background. Ryan pointed to the chair that Pence once sat in as House Republican Conference chairman. As Pence ended his comments, he said, "Pray for the president, pray for his family, pray for our conference, and pray for the country," according to Representative Dave Reichert of Washington.
And what do the Amish lobby, gay wedding bans, and the ban on the national anthem have in common? For starters, they're all make-believe and invented by the same man. Paul Horner, the 38-year-old impresario of a Facebook fake news empire, has made his living off viral news hoaxes for several years. He has twice convinced the internet that he's British graffiti artist Banksy. He also published the very viral, very fake news of a Yelp versus South Park lawsuit last year. But in recent months, Horner has found the fake news ecosystem growing more crowded, more political, and vastly more influential. In March, Donald Trump's son, Eric, and his then campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, even tweeted links to one of Horner's faux articles. His stories have also appeared as news on Google. In light of concerns that stories like Horner's may have affected the presidential election, and in the wake of announcements that both Google and Facebook would take action against deceptive outlets, the Washington Post called Horner to discuss his perspectives on fake news. Question: you've been writing fake news for a while now. You're kind of like the OG Facebook news hoaxer. Well, I'd call it hoaxing or fake news. You'd call it parody or satire. How is that seen different now than it was 3 or 5 years ago? Why did something like your story about Obama invalidating the election results, almost 250,000 Facebook shares as of this writing, go so viral? Mr. Horner answers, honestly, people are definitely dumber. They just keep passing stuff around. Nobody fact checks anything anymore. I mean, that's how Trump got elected. He just said whatever he wanted and people believed everything. And when the things he said turned out not to be true, people didn't care because they'd already accepted it. It's real scary. I've never seen anything like it. Question, you mentioned Trump, and you probably heard the argument or the concern that fake news somehow helped him get elected. What do you make of that? Mr. Horner replies, my sites were picked up by Trump supporters all the time. I think Trump is in the White House because of me. His followers don't fact check anything. They'll post everything, believe anything. His campaign manager posted my story about a protester getting paid $3,500 as fact. Like I made that up. I posted a fake ad on Craigslist. Question, why? I mean, why would you even write that? Mr. Horner answers, just because his supporters were under the belief that people were getting paid to protest at their rallies, and that's just insane. I've gone to Trump protests. Trust me, no one needs to get paid to protest Trump. I just wanted to make fun of that insane belief, but it took off. They actually believed it. I thought they'd fact check it and it'd make them look worse. I mean, that's how this always works. Someone posts something I write, then they find out it's false and they look like idiots. But Trump supporters, they just keep running with it. They never fact check anything. Now he's in the White House. Looking back, instead of hurting the campaign, I think I helped it. And that feels bad.
We're going to move now to local and legislative news from Lincoln. Lincoln Public School officials apologized Thursday for asking students to remove American flags from their vehicles following an incident on Veterans Day. Steve Joel, superintendent of the Lincoln Public Schools, said that all students are allowed to fly the flag and that school administration should never have asked for the flag's removal. Hindsight would suggest that this could have been handled in a different way, Joel said. Administration at LPS's Career Academy on Friday received a report that an American flag had been pulled from a flagpole holder on a student vehicle parked at the academy and placed in the bed of a neighboring vehicle. Nearly 400 LPS students are enrolled at the academy located at Southeast Community College at 84th and O Streets in Lincoln, though just a handful of students who made the flag holders in welding class displayed flags on their vehicles. The student who reported the incident was concerned that the matter was creating a disruptive climate given the divisive presidential election, Joel said. That prompted Career Academy administration to determine additional disruption could follow. Administration then asked students not to place American flags on their vehicles while parked at Southeast Community College. We should not have asked our students to remove them, Joel said. Joel got involved after an article on the incident appeared in Thursday's Lincoln Journal-Star. School administration also had heard from many concerned students, families, and community members, he said. We believe that decision was an error, and we believe this easily and understandably could have been misinterpreted as infringing on the rights of freedom and expression of speech, he said. He declined to say whether the administrator who made the initial decision will face consequences, citing personnel matters. He noted that administrators make their decisions with the best information that is available to them at that point in time. School officials are reviewing security videotape to determine who removed the flag.
Sarah Schnabel remembers her dad with a bucket and rag, mopping up blood spatters. She remembers her mom on a recliner, blood running down her face and body, pooling on the porch of her family's rural Utah home. The youngest of Mark and Sandy Schnabel's 3 children, Sarah was 3 the last time she saw her mom. The memory of what happened on May 22, 1999 is seared into her mind. She said in a letter read to the Nebraska Board of Parole on Thursday. Mark Schnabel beat his wife with a blunt object that day, breaking her ribs and skull. Then, in an elaborate attempt to hide the crime, he put her body under a 1992 Dodge Caravan on the couple's 5-acre Utah farm and set the van on fire. Sandy Schnabel was 40 when she died. She was a popular high school teacher and volleyball coach, leading Utah's team to 6 state tournament appearances. On Thursday, 6 women she mentored as young athletes were among the 40 or so people who attended the parole hearing at the Nebraska State Penitentiary. Heads bowed, they sat in a line and held hands as they waited for the board's decision, letting out audible gasps of relief when the board voted unanimously to deny parole. It's a weird emotion. It doesn't feel victorious, but it feels somewhat relieving for now, said Amy Otter, who graduated from high school in 1994 and is a sergeant with the Omaha Police Department. Otter testified against Mark Schnabel's release and voiced frustration that the hearing was taking place at all. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The district judge, Mary Gilbreth, failed to set a minimum sentence, making him eligible for parole after 10 years. The Nebraska Supreme Court blocked an attempt by the judge to correct the order, so Schnabel's sentence, which defaulted to a 20-year minimum, stands. On Thursday, several members of the parole board thanked the Schnabel family and others who testified and wrote enough letters to fill 2 file folders, each several inches thick. Randall Reimer noted that Mark Schnabel had been a model prisoner, but he and other board members said the deep trauma to community and family described in testimony influenced the vote. Sarah Schnabel, who asked that her father not be paroled, wrote that she lives in fear, chronically on edge and afraid to let others get close to her. She said she has panic attacks and was unable to attend the hearing because she is in the hospital for ongoing emotional trauma. My mother was dead when I last saw her. My life changed forever, she wrote in the letter read by a family member. Trevor Schnabel was 9 when his mother died. He said he heard screams and the thud of something hitting her the night she died. He said he went to see what was going on, according to trial coverage, but his dad told him to go back upstairs. Thursday, he said he would fear for his and his family's lives if his father were released. It has been incredibly hard to live a normal life in the shadow of this brutality, Trevor Schnabel said. Had the board voted yes, Mark Schnabel planned to move to South Dakota, get a job, and take care of his mother, who testified on his behalf on Thursday. Jerry Schnabel of Colorado Springs said the family has the means to help support his brother if he were released. Mark Schnabel told the board he has tried to put his best foot forward during his time in prison and would respect his children's wishes for no contact. It doesn't mean I love them any less, he said. The Schnabel children had been raised by Sandy Schnabel's sister, Tina Comer, and her husband. Comer said Thursday that Mark Schnabel could never be trusted and her family would never feel safe if he is released.
Creighton University is beefing up security in the wake of a reported sexual assault on the campus last week. The assault is one of 3 that have occurred in the area since April. Omaha police are investigating the assaults and say they may be related. The university began installing guards near 2 dorms during the late night hours, hired extra security officers, is expanding its shuttle service, and has made improvements to its campus notification program, the university said in a statement Thursday night. The most recent assault occurred at one of the dorms on campus. On the evening of November 6th, police say a man followed a 19-year-old woman from the Creighton campus to her dorm near 22nd and Davenport Streets. He pulled her to the ground and forced his hand inside her pants. The assault took place before 9 p.m. The other 2 assaults occurred in the spring. About 1:10 a.m. on April 3rd, police say a man grabbed a 26-year-old woman as she entered her apartment building near 37th and Jackson Streets. The woman said the man touched her under her clothing. And after 11:55 p.m. on April 5th, near 22nd and Davenport Streets, police say a man forced a 20-year-old woman to the ground and sexually groped her over her clothing. The assailant in each of the 3 cases was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, but the men were variously described as white, black, or Hispanic with thin to medium builds. Cindy Workman, a spokeswoman for Creighton, said in the statement released Thursday night that Creighton has contracted with Frontline Private Security, which employs off-duty Omaha police officers or Douglas County Sheriff's deputies to bolster security. Additionally, the university is stationing public safety officers near Kennebec and Hyder Halls during the late night hours. The university is working with the Omaha Police Department Special Victims Unit to investigate last week's assault. Anyone with information regarding the assaults is urged to contact the Special Victims Unit at 402-444-5636. Police may also contact Crime Stoppers at 402-444-STOP or omahacrimestoppers.org.
A Nebraska state agency has paid $57 million in fines and penalties to federal agencies over the last 5 years, but department officials say they have taken steps to reduce the likelihood of future mistakes. Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services administrators told lawmakers Wednesday they have created a new review process, provided more training for staff, and are working more closely with the federal government. The department could owe another $45 million, although that figure could change. Some of the penalties were imposed because the state didn't properly document how it used federal money. In other cases, the department changed how it calculated payments for developmental disability services without getting federal approval. Department spokesman Kathy Osterman said some of the issues arose from audits dating as far back as 2003. Osterman said the penalties, known as disallowances, have previously been reported. "We are cleaning up from these past errors," said Garrett Buller, the department's internal auditor. "It is now our responsibility, and we are committed to do all we can to mitigate potential disallowances from those years." Buller noted that some of the payments to the federal government were reduced after the department provided documentation to support its expenses. In one case, the federal government sought reimbursement of $22 million for child welfare expenses that weren't properly documented, but later reduced the total to $14.2 million. Buller and Department CEO Courtney Phillips provided the update to the legislature's Budget Writing Appropriations Committee.
From Bismarck, North Dakota, Native American tribal leaders' biennial address to the North Dakota legislature will not happen in 2017, a committee said Thursday, in deciding to forego formal events at the state capitol due to security reasons involving the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. The 10-3 vote by the North Dakota Legislative Management Committee means there will be no presentations from the state's Chief Justice or tribal leaders when lawmakers reconvene January 3rd. The measure exempts the governor's State of the State address, which is required by state law. Ongoing protests of the four-state, $3.8 million pipeline in southern North Dakota have significantly strained law enforcement and the state highway patrol, which provides security at this Capitol, Republican House Majority Leader Al Carlson said. Nearly 500 people have been arrested since August. The encampments show no sign of breaking up, and there have been 4 large organized protests in the Bismarck-Mandan area this week. Thursday's protest in Bismarck led to 8 arrests. "We're trying to be proactive," Carlson said. "In no way is this infringing on anyone's First Amendment rights. History shows us in recent months that we need to be cautious." Democrats on the committee opposed the motion, especially since it scrubbed the traditional tribal address. "This is not going to help tribal relations, and it will probably set us up for even more bad situations," said Representative Marvin Nelson of Rolla. "We need to be making every effort we can to reach out to the tribes at this time." By tradition, lawmakers hear speeches during the first week of each odd-numbered year session, including from North Dakota's Chief Justice and by one leader from the state's tribes: Spirit Lake Sioux, 3 affiliated tribes, Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, Standing Rock Sioux, and Sisseton Wapiton Oyate. No tribe has been chosen to give the address for 2017, a tradition that dates back to 1985, according to Legislative Council Director Jim Smith. The chairman of the tribe behind the legal push to stop the nearly 1,200-mile-long pipeline, Standing Rock Sioux's David Archambault, gave the address in 2015, asking lawmakers to do more to protect public safety and the environment during the state's oil boom. His tribe and other protest supporters say the pipeline being built by Energy Transfer Partners of Texas threatens the tribe's water sources and cultural sites. Carson said the legislature will err on the side of safety at the Capitol. Protecting people is our number one priority, he said.
And from South Sioux City, officials in South Sioux City are working with a company to eliminate a horrible odor that forced some residents to leave their homes. The City Council approved an agreement on Monday with a company to begin testing for hydrogen sulfide in the homes affected by the odor. The odor originates from the nearby Big Ox energy plant and has spread through sewer lines beneath area homes. About 60 homes have signed up for the testing, which will begin Thursday, according to innovative business consultants risk manager Ian Iacino. A long-term solution for the odor includes installing a separate industrial waste line, which would isolate the residential areas from industrial wastewater. Working on the permanent line could begin in the next couple of weeks, but until then, temporary fixes will be installed while the permanent line is designed and put together, said Terry Lutz, president of McClure Engineering. Industrial workers can be safely exposed to a reading of 10 hydrogen sulfide parts per million over a time period of 8 hours, according to the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration. The average readings at manholes in the affected areas in South Sioux City have risen well above that level, sometimes reaching 100 parts per million. Residents of the affected areas voiced their concern at the City Council meeting, saying many of them have been living in local hotels for the past month.
Snowy conditions blew into western and northern Nebraska overnight as a major storm swept through the plains. In eastern Nebraska, especially the Omaha area, the storm's effects will be mostly felt in howling winds today. The good news, conditions begin improving on Saturday. Most of Nebraska is under a winter storm watch or warning today. In northwestern Nebraska, 3 to 7 inches of snow was forecast overnight into today. Thursday evening, roads throughout western and much of northern Nebraska were all or partially snow covered, according to the Nebraska Department of Roads. Winds of up to 50 miles an hour were expected to cause blowing and drifting snow, which was expected to make driving hazardous. The winter storm watches and warnings were expected to remain in effect most of today. Ryan McPike, KMTV meteorologist, said he wasn't expecting any snow to accumulate in the Omaha area. I think we're pretty safe, he said. The slight chance of rain and snow forecast this morning in the metro area was expected to diminish by the noon hour. The wind is expected to die down overnight tonight. Nevertheless, a hard freeze is forecast tonight and Saturday night, bringing an abrupt end to this year's mild autumn. If you can brave today's winds, any lingering marigolds, petunias, and roses can be cut and taken inside to cheer up the indoors. Otherwise, they'll surely get nipped by the freeze. Wind chills the next 2 nights are forecast in the teens. Saturday and Sunday in the Omaha area will be sunny with highs in the low to upper 40s. Temperatures will rise again Monday through Wednesday with highs expected in the low 50s. There is a decent chance of rain Tuesday, forecasters said. We'll stay warm enough just to keep it rain for us, McPike said. However, Thanksgiving travel could be disrupted by a storm forecast to move across the country next week. While it's too early to fill in the details, AccuWeather, the World Herald's weather consultant, reported that a system brewing in the west is likely to produce substantial rain or snow over a part of the central U.S. next week. Cities that could be affected include Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Detroit, Cincinnati, Nashville, Atlanta, and New Orleans, AccuWeather.com said. AAA estimates that almost 49 million Americans will travel at least 50 miles from their homes over the Thanksgiving holiday.
The city of Grand Island may propose a $7 million bond issue to build a new water tank that would lead to a rate increase for some residents. The elevated water tank would allow the city to meet water demand, especially when it peaks during summer mornings as people water their lawns. The proposed tank would be in southwest Grand Island at a housing development. City Utility Director Tim Lushinger said instead of rate increases for all water users, customers' bills would be based on the amount of water they use. A recommendation from a cost of service study would charge more for customers who use the most water, primarily for watering their lawns. If you don't use anything, you won't be charged for using water, he said. We feel it is appropriate for heavy users to pay a little more for the water during that time because they are the ones causing that increased demand. Lushinger and other city officials expressed concern that with the current water demand, lawn watering will increase as the city continues to grow, especially with automatic sprinkler systems. Since the city would need to use reserve high-pressure water wells to meet sprinkler demand, fire crews might face a water pressure problem when fighting blazes during those peak hours. Lushinger said the life of an elevated water tank is expected to be 20 years or lower. The City Council will discuss the potential rate increase next week.
Cabela's will hold its annual meeting December 13th at 8 a.m. at the company's headquarters in Sydney. Not on the agenda, details of the $5.5 billion acquisition by Bass Pro Shops, which was announced in October. The company said in a government filing that a separate meeting and shareholder vote will be held at a later date. Shareholders and community members may still use the meeting as a chance to bring up the merger and how it will affect Sydney, a town of 6,800 in which 2,000 people work at Cabela's. The company, when the deal closes, will be a subsidiary of Bass Pro and will be headquartered in Springfield, Missouri. My guess is that the elephant in the room is going to be the Bass Pro deal, and that's not on the agenda, said Rob Barrick, Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Falls Communications, a public and investor relations company in Cleveland. That, to me, will be what's interesting about this upcoming annual meeting, is what types of rules and protocols they put in place to manage the conversation, should investors or community members try to take the conversation off the agenda. That may be one reason the company is hosting the meeting in the middle of December in the company's headquarters rather than in the public Sydney High School. Cabela's traditionally held its annual meetings in the spring, but this year it was delayed, probably because of the ongoing negotiations with Bass Pro and the involvement of activist investor Elliott Management, which bought up 11% of the company last year and agitated for changes, like a sale of the company. Cabela's didn't comment for this story. On the agenda in December, re-election of 10 directors to the board, ratifying an appointment by Deloitte & Touche LLP of the company's registered public accounting firm for fiscal 2016, holding an advisory vote on executive compensation, and any other business shareholders might want to bring up at the meeting.
And it is 44 minutes. Let's see, we've still got time for something else here. From Gibbon, Nebraska, Gibbon students are learning all they can about preparing for college, starting as early as their sophomore year of high school. All of the students enrolled in the Pathways for Success class will be the first in their families to attend college. To achieve this goal, Gibbon High School Spanish teacher Abby Jones is giving them the guidance they need. We learn about how to apply for scholarships and how to put together a resume, Jones said. Before we started this program, I worked with 4 students individually. With the help of teachers and the guidance counselor, I helped them do what they needed to do to get into college. This year, we started offering this as a class. I didn't know what an ACT was or how to do a resume, junior Kelly Tovar said of her knowledge before enrolling in the class. The Pathways for Success class is offered this year to sophomores, juniors, and seniors, Jones said. The freshmen have too many other required classes to fit it in this year, but we're hoping to fit it in their schedules in the future, she said. Jones said the class meets daily. During class time, students share their experiences in their activities. They also learned who was appropriate to ask to be a reference for scholarships and what to include on a resume, Jones said. I could tell by the fourth draft of my resume it looked better and seemed more professional, sophomore Marcia Mendez said. Senior Mauricio Martinez said he hopes the class will help him learn how to get as much scholarship money as possible for college. I know I can't do it myself, he said. Senior Naomi Escandon hopes to get a full ride to the University of Nebraska at Kearney and is working hard toward that goal. Jones hopes to grow the program. I'm really excited. This opportunity is open to all the students who need it, she said. The kids are really working hard. In addition to college prep, Jones encourages her students to get involved in extracurricular activities at the school and to volunteer in the community. Mendez said she and other students volunteered for 2 weekends at the Nebraska State Fair. We worked in the Welcome Center. We were in the Lost and Found place and looked through items there when people came by to see if their things were there. We helped with the kids on the playground. We did interpreting too, Abigail Corona said. We interpreted for the Welcome Center and for games. Every 2 weeks, we'd help translate the Head Start newsletter too. Each of us is given parts of it to interpret. Senior Lisa Moore volunteered at the Harvest Harmony Parade in Grand Island. I helped welcome band members that participated, Moore said.
We're going to move now to the obituaries and funeral arrangements. These are the ones posted today in the Omaha World Herald. Ramel, Beverly Juwan Ramel, 38. Funeral service 2 p.m. on Saturday, November 19th at Good Shepherd Funeral Home. Brown, Ruth E. Brown, 93. Visitation Friday, November 18th. Services at the Bel Air Chapel. Butler, Janelle L. Butler, 65. Memorial service 2 p.m. Saturday, November 19th, Bellevue Memorial Chapel. Memorials will be directed by the family. Edwards, Imani Page Edwards, age 1 year. Funeral service at 3 p.m. at Glad Tidings Church in Omaha. Memorials will be directed by the family. Egan, William P. Egan, Dr. Egan, 82. He was a veteran. He served in the Coast Guard as a medic. Funeral service at noon on Saturday, November 19th at Christ the King Catholic Church. Please, no flowers. In honor of Dr. Egan and all the wonderful care he received, in lieu of flowers, please send memorials to VNA Hospice. Fritz, Barbara J. Riley Fritz, 74. Funeral service Tuesday, 10 a.m. at West Lawn Hillcrest Chapel. Glick, Richard N. Glick Jr., 55. Celebration of Life service will be held at 1 p.m. Saturday, November 19th at Stonebridge Christian Church, lower level. Green, Ellen Ann Hamilton Green, 88. Mass of Christian burial Monday, 10 a.m., St. Robert Bellarmine Catholic Church. Memorials to EPS. Hartman, Ashley F. Liner Hartman, 31. Celebration of Life on Sunday, November 20th from 1 to 4 p.m. at VFW Post 8904 Military Road. Kammerer, Kenneth W. Kammerer, 62. Funeral service noon Saturday at Trinity Lutheran Church Papillion. Memorials to Alcoholics Anonymous or Trinity Lutheran Church. Lakin, Florence May Swoboda Lakin, 96. In keeping with Florence's humble nature, there will be graveside services only at the Emerson, Iowa Cemetery at 3 p.m. on Saturday, November 19th. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to Sunset Hills Baptist Church. Lawson, Joshua Carl Lawson, 36. Memorial services, 11 a.m. Saturday, November 19th, First Christian Church. McRae, Mitchell K. McRae, 25, of Olin, Iowa. Funeral service will be at 3 p.m. on Saturday, November 19th at Leahy Funeral Home in Olin. In lieu of flowers, donations may be left in his honor to Friends of the Animals Animal Shelter in Tipton. Menard, Jeffrey H. Menard, 76. Memorial service 2:30 p.m. Saturday, November 19th at El Bethel Assembly of God Church in Council Bluffs. Moorfield, Arlene J. Moorfield, 80. A complete notice will follow later. Murray, Eileen Joan Murray, 88. Mass of Christian burial Friday 10 a.m. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Catholic Church. Neeland, Timothy J. Neeland, 57. Celebration of Life Saturday, November 19th at 3 p.m. at the Bel Air Chapel. In lieu of flowers, memorials to Tim's granddaughter's education fund. Nolan, Rosemary Nolan, 93. Services are pending. Owen, Charles Lee Owen, 72. Memorial graveside service, 1 p.m. Saturday, November 19th at the Mount Olive Cemetery in rural Hamburg, Iowa. Memorials may be directed to the family. Paltani, Bernice Paltani, 97. Funeral Mass, 10 a.m. Saturday at Holy Ghost Church, 5219 South 53rd Street. Rossi, John A. Rossi, 80. Mass of Christian burial at 10:30 a.m. at St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Church. Memorials to Creighton Medical Center. Seedleck, Gladys R. Seedleck, 90 of Omaha. Mass of Christian burial, 10 a.m. Saturday, November 19th at St. Mary's Catholic Church, David City. Memorials, Family's Choice. Stallnaker, Denise H. Stallnaker, 70. Services Monday, 11 a.m., Presbyterian Church of the Cross. Memorials to Presbyterian Church of the Cross. Strayer, Becky A. Strayer, 63. Celebration of Life will be Sunday, November 20th from 12 noon to 2 p.m. at the Embassy Suites in La Vista. The memorials will be directed by the family. Tiki, Warren W. Tiki, 92 of Tecama. He was a veteran. Memorial service, 1 p.m. Saturday, November 19th at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Tecama. Memorials to the family for later designation. Walsh, Clayton Dean Walsh, 83. Mass of Christian burial Saturday, 9 a.m., St. Philip Neri Catholic Church. Interment with military honors by Millard, American Legion Post 374 and VFW Post 8334. Wittrig, Beulah E. Wittrig, 93 of West Point. Funeral service is 11 a.m. on Saturday, November 19th at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in West Point. Memorial suggested to St. Paul's Lutheran Church or to St. Paul's Lutheran School in West Point. Wolf, Adam Edward Wolf, 38. Services Friday, November 18th at 11 a.m. Greater Bethel Temple. Young, Jamie Lee Cisney Young of Omaha, formerly of Austin, Texas. Held in lieu of flowers, the family asked to have donations made to Homeward Bound in the Heartland. And that is all of the announcements for the Omaha World Herald.
And these are obituaries from the Lincoln Journal-Star for Friday, November 18th. Busboom, Shirley V. Bolt Busboom. She was 95 and lived in Lincoln. Butheris, Mazer, and Love is handling arrangements, memorials to the family. Clausen, Linda E. Torrey Clausen. She was 61 and lived in Lincoln. The Fox Funeral Home in Beatrice is handling services. Einspar, C. Einspar was 90 years of age and lived in Seward. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to the Zabka Funeral Home in Seward. Memorials to the Center for Liturgical Art at Concordia University, St. John Child Development Center, St. John Lutheran Church, or St. John Lutheran School. Goodwin, Rick O. Goodwin, was 59 years of age and lived in Lincoln. Services are pending at Wyuka Funeral Home. Halterman, Betty J. Halterman, was 86 when she died in Beatrice on November 16. Joseph Margaret K. Maggie Joseph was 85 and lived in Lincoln. Mass of Christian burial will be Saturday morning at St. John the Apostle Catholic Church. Memorials in honor of Margaret Joseph to the Food Bank of Lincoln Backpack Program, the Roper and Sons Funeral Home. Judds Lucille F. Judds was 85 and lived in Lincoln. The Roper and Sons Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Memorials may be directed to Faith Lutheran Church at 8701 Adams Street in Lincoln. Keeler, John Daniel Keeler, was 61 and lived in Lincoln. The Butheris Mazer and Love Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Caranda, Frank J. Caranda, was 84 and lived in Wahoo. He was a veteran. The Svoboda Funeral Home in Wahoo is handling arrangements. Memorials to St. Wenceslaus Catholic Church or in care of the family for Wahoo Parks and Recreation. Sand, Marian R. Sand, was 91 and lived in Syracuse. The Fusselman Allen Harvey Funeral Home in Syracuse is handling arrangements. Memorials are suggested to the family for future designation. Sercel, Vera L. Sercel. Sercel is spelled S-E-R-C-L. She was 96 years of age when she died on November 17. Severance, Vera Bell Severance, was 91 and lived in Hickman, formerly in Lincoln. Memorials to the family for future designation, the Roper and Sons Funeral Home. Thiel, Mickey P. Thiel, was 78 when he died in York on November 16. He was a veteran serving in the U.S. Army. The Metz Mortuary in York is handling services. Memorials may be directed to St. Jude Children's Hospital or the family. Sierra, Olna Beulah Newball Sierra, was 93 and lived in Lincoln. The Roper and Sons Funeral Home is handling services. Memorials may be directed to College View SDA Church at 4801 Prescott Avenue in Lincoln. Tomzik, Stanislaw or Stanley Tomzik, was 68 and lived in Lincoln. Memorials are suggested to disabled American veterans. The Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is handling services. And my final notice is for Zagers. Vanessa M. Casper Zagers was 81 and lived in David City. The Crackle Funeral Chapel in David City is handling arrangements. Listeners, memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible, and they go a long way toward keeping us on the air. Please keep us in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations can be sent to the Radio Talking Book Network at 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205 in Omaha, Nebraska. Our zip code is 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter. And Bev and I will be back following a short break with editorials, living in entertainment, business and markets, and sports.
And thank you very much, Ralph Morocco and Bev Redding, for being the first hour from today's newspapers. We'll be back to our fine readers after we do indeed take a short break, as Ralph just indicated. So the first thing we need to do is to present the home delivery meal menus for those listeners who need Ann Pelican. Good morning and welcome, Ann.
Friday, the 18th, crunchy pollock with tartar sauce, of rotten zucchini, Parmesan tomatoes, wheat bread with margarine, oatmeal apple squares, and a pint of 1% milk.
And thank you very much, Ann Pelican. You can hear the home delivery menus each and every weekday at this time, and you can also hear a feature that has been requested by a listener, and we have accommodated the listener, and hope it's helpful to all of you. The home delivery menus are played again just prior to the book show, about 12:59 p.m. this afternoon, and that will be following community conversations. Here is Becca Journey to tell us about today's Community Conversations program.
Stay tuned in to your community every Friday at noon with Community Conversations. This week we feature interviews with Mark Bolger from the Omaha Association of the Blind and Brandon Ryan and Courtney Smith from Adaptive Defense Methods. Hi everybody, this is Ann Pelican and I'm doing a little promo for our feature presentation for Saturday Night at the Movies, November the 19th at 6:30 p.m. The movie that I have chosen is a very old, good classic, wholesome movie, and it is The Notebook. It's a very, very extremely good show, and I hope everyone enjoys it. So, I tell everyone, please.
Okay. Did we run over?
But I hope to see everybody there.
Good, good. I didn't know how many you had.
Very, very much.
Thanks.
And this concludes our break.
Nope, we're back. We better start. What are we doing here? Editorials, okay.
Let's head on back over to our fine readers studio A, where the continuation begins from today's Omaha World Herald and Lincoln Journal-Star. Let's welcome back Tom Morocco and Beverly Lydick.
And we will kick off the second half with letters to the editor, these from the Lincoln Journal-Star. Norman W. Schaefer of Lincoln writes, "In our history, we've had 5 times where a candidate won the popular vote but lost the electoral college vote. In each case, no doubt, there were calls to eliminate this so-called archaic remnant. What is often lost in the argument is the electoral college was conceived to protect the minority. To illustrate this, let's simplify things. Suppose there are only 2 states, Nebraska with 5 electoral votes and Texas with 38. For our illustration, every person, even children, vote. Texas has 27.47 million voters, while Nebraska has 1.9. There is one question on the ballot, whether or not to give Texas everybody's money. Nebraska will never win this election, and Texas will get every cent we earn. Now, the people of Nebraska would get mighty sick of this, so they talked to their friends in Michigan and Ohio to join them. The population of the Nebraska-Michigan-Ohio Union is 23.43 million, but together they have 39 electoral votes. The 3-state compact will never win the popular vote, but together they could win the electoral college and put the money of the people back into their pockets. So next time there's a call to eliminate the electoral college, stop and think how the unintended consequences may affect Nebraska and Kansas, the Dakotas, and so many other smaller states." Our next letter comes from Julie Weiss of Lincoln, who writes, "It won't make any difference in this election, but it is way past time for the Electoral College to be taken out of the Constitution and the popular vote to stand. When the Constitution was written, information was sent by horse and buggy, for crying out loud. The Constitution was made to grow with us, not keep us chained to it, but our senators and congressmen won't change it. We, the people, will have to force the issue because they will lose the power to set it. Maybe then it won't just be the 2 parties and that don't stand for anything anymore. The old line that the Electoral College was there to keep one state from having more power is so much crap. Nebraska only votes Republican unless we get lucky, and then state legislators want to take that away. The Republican senators of this nice state spent so much money and time on trying to get that one electoral vote changed that it is pathetic. While we are trying to get rid of things, we need to get rid of the unicameral and make it just like all the other states, because it is just as broken as the rest.
And here are the letters to the editor in the Public Pulse in the Omaha World Herald. This first one is from Connie Rumbaugh of Omaha. Having students running the halls using unsuitable language, running into classmates and teachers, and knocking some of them to the floor is unacceptable. What happened to the discipline we used to have in our schools? What has happened to the respect we should have for ourselves and others? Our teachers are not psychologists or security guards. They are in the classrooms to teach our children. Kids know the only repercussions to this kind of behavior are a talk by the teacher, being made to sit quietly in the corner of the room, or maybe as a last resort, a visit with a counselor. Our teachers do not need to learn new discipline measures. Our students do. What happened to suspensions or expulsions for violent or disruptive behavior? What happened to parents being involved with their children? We are going to be losing good teachers because of the behavior of these children and the lack of discipline in our schools. Punishing teachers because they can't teach under these circumstances is absurd. Maybe we ought to consider replacing the superintendent, school board, and principals for not backing our teachers. Here's a letter from A.R. Gentry of Omaha. I'm just curious if anyone else finds it ironic that the protesters of the Dakota Access Pipeline chose this symbolic gesture of burning a written document from the 1400s. The destruction of a 600-year-old historical document may have been more effective had the protesters not used transportation that relies on fossil fuels to arrive at the site. I am optimistic that the Army Corps of Engineers has the technology and integrity to design and fulfill a reliable plan for constructing this pipeline. If pessimists ruled the day, we would never have had a telegraph or railroad system. And here is a letter from Leon Bracker of Fremont. Halloween is long over. However, there remains a monster lurking. The monster is the Costco chicken processing plant that is projected to locate in Fremont, only 26 miles upriver from Omaha. Unfortunately, Omaha will share the pollution from processing hundreds of thousands of chickens per day. In addition, millions more chickens will be housed in and around 400 grower barns within 30 miles of Fremont. Disease and pollution. What type of person would do this to a neighbor, let alone his or her own family? The risk of respiratory problems is 10 times greater if you live within a mile of a chicken grower barn. The fecal matter produced by these chickens will be spread on the farmland, creating a nightmare of nitrates, polluting streams, rivers, sandpit lakes, and individual wells, not to mention the odor that is produced by such large operations. Omaha, beware. The Fremont City Council and Mayor voted to approve this catastrophe with no prior environmental study and with no approval by the citizens of Fremont. Not exactly a democratic process. I ask Omahans to help stop this nightmare and protect the quality of life in your city as well as in Fremont. Here's a letter from Lori Thomas of Bellevue. Recently, my 16-year-old daughter was driving home from school on the interstate when her car began to overheat, steam coming out from under the hood. She took the exit and was trying to get to a safe location when her car stopped, still on the road. As my daughter is still a novice driver, she was perplexed as to what to do next. Immediately, a woman stopped her car and offered her assistance. The first question she asked my daughter was, "Are you okay?" Almost immediately, a gentleman driving by also stopped his car to offer his assistance. His first question also was, "Are you okay?" The woman and the gentleman provided problem solved with my daughter, getting her car off the road into a safe location. To the woman and gentleman who helped my daughter, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to ensure my daughter's safety. Thank you for being kind to her. Thank you for being good Samaritans. And we also have a letter from Diane Lux of Omaha. Helen Heller's November 11th public pulse letter reminded me that it's not just elections that have winners and losers. Life does as well. Now students are encouraged to show their hurt feelings when their presidential candidate doesn't win by walking out of class, protesting, setting off fire alarms, and disrupting traffic flow, seemingly with no penalties. Student colleges now have safe spaces where students can go and not be exposed to anything that might hurt their delicate psyches. Students are allowed to skip tests if they're upset by election results. This is further proof that we have become an entitlement society. Wake up, America. We are losing the characteristics that made our country the world leader for centuries, valuing grit, determination, and hard work. Let's give our new president-elect a chance. And finally, here is a letter from Dennis Kerr of Omaha. Hillary Clinton has asked us to keep an open mind about Donald Trump, and I certainly will, as soon as he apologizes for the things he said during the campaign. Among those things, he said Mexicans are rapists and that we should ban Muslims from entering the country. I want to forgive him and move forward, but he refuses to apologize. Trump correctly criticized President George W. Bush for starting an unnecessary war in Iraq, but at least Bush didn't teach others to hate Muslims. Trump rightly criticized Hillary Clinton's handling of her email, but at least she didn't use her personal server to tell others to hate Mexicans. Trump's first order of business should be to apologize for each of the terrible things he said in the campaign.
And if we turn to our View column written by the editorial staff of the Lincoln Journal-Star, 80 years of proud nonpartisan independence in Nebraska will be threatened at the start of the next session of the legislature if Republican Party operatives have their way. With 17 new senators in the chamber, party stalwarts plan another attempt to change the rules that have been in place since the nonpartisan one-house legislature was implemented in 1937. The GOP operatives want to end the practice of secret votes for leadership positions. The party has been rankled for years that occasionally Democrats win enough votes to chair a committee. The attempt is a serious case of overreach. Republicans don't even have a majority of the registered voters in the state. They're outnumbered by the combined total of Democrats, registered nonpartisans, and libertarians, according to totals on file at the Secretary of State's office. The party has attempted to sell the change as a step toward transparency. The argument doesn't hold up to examination. If votes are public, unelected party leaders will pull the strings from GOP headquarters. If anyone thinks the GOP operatives will be satisfied with keeping Democrats out of leadership positions, they're fooling themselves. The behind-the-scenes operatives want to be able to pick their chairs themselves and control who advances in the party hierarchy. Making the votes public allows the unelected operatives to reward those who vote in accordance with their wishes and punish those who do not. Key decisions on legislative affairs will be made behind closed doors, and senators ordered to toe the party line. The legendary independence of Nebraska's state senators in the nation's only nonpartisan unicameral legislature was already under attack. Governor Pete Ricketts turned on GOP incumbents who had strayed from his dictates in the last election, funding and endorsing their opponents. There's little doubt that he'll be pulling more strings in the next session. Also influencing election outcomes and attacking Republicans who dared step out of line were donor-supported groups like Americans for Prosperity and shadowy out-of-state groups like Trees of Liberty. Anyone who wants to look at how political parties can mess up government need only look at Washington. If party bosses start calling the shots in the legislature, they'll look at issues from the perspective of how they can be used to further partisan advantage, not how they can be addressed for public benefit. Nebraska has been well served by a nonpartisan legislative branch in which lawmakers think for themselves and make independent decisions on the basis of what is best for the constituents. When an attempt was made in 2015 to make public senators' votes for leadership positions, the proposal was voted down 33-12. We hope senators defeat the attempt again next year.
And here's a letter, an editorial from the staff at the World Herald. Many positive things we take for granted in our community and state weren't always that way. It's important to stop on occasion and appreciate the vision and actions of those who came before us and tackled big needs for future generations. The group Friends of the Niobrara did that recently when it presented its second Niobrara River Keeper Award to the family of the late Loren Wilson in his honor. The Niobrara these days is a treasured recreational gem. People drift leisurely down its waters by canoe or inner tube, enjoying the picturesque landscapes with Valentine a hub for outfitting. About 40,000 people float the river each year. Wilson, who died at age 51 in 1986, was one of the key figures who helped boost public awareness of the Niobrara's recreational potential and the need to safeguard it. He helped lead public opposition that led the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation to abandon plans to build the Norden Dam on the river. In 1991, Congress designated 76 miles of the Niobrara as a national scenic river. Work to protect the Niobrara continues in the present day. It was tremendously encouraging to see the parties work out a landmark agreement last year on Niobrara water rights, for example. The negotiations struck a sensible balance among the interests of the Nebraska Public Power District, irrigators, and the recreation industry. Such a commendable effort builds on the foundations laid years before by Nebraska supporters of the Niobrara. In that group, Loren Wilson and his legacy stand tall.
And we'll turn to some of the lighter columns in each of our papers. This is the Ask Amy column appearing in the Lincoln Journal-Star. Dear Amy, a senior citizen member of my family who lives in my house gets high at least 3 times a day. I'm concerned about her health. She smokes pot morning, noon, and night. When she is somewhat lucid, it is with eyes half closed and a vacant smile on her face. Sometimes she stares at inanimate objects or pauses for a long time in the middle of a sentence. I'm worried that these are signs of a medical problem rather than the fact she is high. She doesn't seem aware of these behaviors. Any attempt to talk about this is met with anger. 3 years ago, I managed to quit cigarettes. My house is now smoke-free. This family member smokes outside or in her car, which is fine. She also feels the need to sneak around and hide as if I were her parent, which I am definitely not. She is over 60, but behaves like she's in junior high. I'm worried that this too is a sign of some mental deterioration, not just spending her life half-baked. She thinks that her pot use makes her cool and young. In reality, the younger family members find her behavior pathetic. I'm embarrassed for her, but more importantly, how can I tell if there is really something physically or mentally wrong? Signed, Worried. Dear Worried, from your description, it sounds as if this person is indeed half-baked, more or less all the time. I'm assuming that this drug use is legal where you live. Her compulsive marijuana use means that it is always in her system and that she is constantly stoking her high. But she is an adult. She is making daily choices, and even if you don't agree with these choices, unless they have a significant and real impact on you beyond your disapproval, there isn't much you can do other than express your loving concern. If you're trying to get someone to stop a habit or addiction, you can only tell your own truth, attach meaningful consequences, and follow through. Does her drug use disrupt or interfere with your life in significant ways? Does she drive while impaired? It might help to make your point if you can film her during an impairment moment and show it to her when she is less impaired and you were both calm. Don't do this to shame her. Don't share it with others. Don't call her pathetic, and don't judge why she does this or whether she thinks she's cool. Express your concern and worry. Tell her you know from your own smoking addiction how hard it is to overcome her dependency, and offer to take her to the doctor for a screening for any underlying medical issues. Dear Amy, last year my mother died from a cancer that none of us, not even our father, knew about. She kept her diagnosis a secret until she could no longer hide the truth. We had less than 1 week to try and make sense of things before she died. Watching our elderly father grieve not only this crippling loss, but also the concealment, has been heartbreaking. I want to believe she thought she was protecting all of us, but instead it feels like a betrayal. Please urge your readers to carefully consider how withholding a cancer diagnosis or other life-altering illness negatively impacts those who love them. Signed, Grieving Daughter. Dear Grieving, this is heartbreaking. I hope you will accompany your father to a grief support group. It would help all of you to grieve together and to walk this journey with others. You were bewildered by your mother's choice, but I'm sure you can imagine the combination of stoicism, fear, and sadness she was experiencing. I'm very sorry for this loss. Dear Amy, I was appalled at your response to Horrified Dad, the father who didn't want his 13-year-old son to watch The Exorcist and other R-rated horror movies. The Exorcist is extremely disturbing. I agree with this dad's choice. Signed, Another Dad. Dear Dad, it is each parent's right and responsibility to monitor the media their children consume. It helps if a parent is familiar with the content in order to make an informed decision. In my opinion, not all R-rated movies are universally inappropriate for teens.
This is a story that's featured on the front page of the Omaha World-Herald. It's not usually where we get our living today and entertainment stories from, because they're usually in another section, but this story is on the front page, and it is written by Matthew Hansen, who is a columnist for the Omaha World-Herald. It's called The Power of One Person. Cindy starts just after dawn, pulling on her plastic gloves and grabbing her trash bag and preparing to do something that's easy to contemplate, but harder to complete. She's not complaining about her neighborhood or her city. She's not wishing it were better or hoping that someone else makes it so. Cindy Taft is changing her hood. She's changing it one meeting, one email, and one trash bag at a time. Who else will, she asks. Cindy lives and operates a small business in her 72nd and Dodge Street, which means her neighborhood happens to be near the intersection that Omaha regards as its epicenter. If we were playing a giant citywide game of tag, 72nd and Dodge would be home base. Actually, a giant citywide game of tag is a really good idea. But our home base has problems visible when you zoom by in a car, but far more obvious if you live or work near here, as Cindy does. The Crossroads Mall is half abandoned, and efforts to redevelop the area have stalled. The intersection is scary to cross on foot, with roaring traffic and unpainted crosswalks. Homeless Omahans and panhandlers often crowd the intersection, shaking cardboard signs, asking for money, and sleeping under trees and bushes. And the area is dirty, really dirty. Trash piles up around the grimy bus benches, in the cracked parking lots, and on the sidewalk and the curb itself. This last problem is why, roughly 3 times a week, Cindy starts her morning by putting on those plastic gloves, grabbing her trash bag, and heading out from her business, Crossroads Massage Clinic. I walk along on a recent weekday, struggling to take notes and keep up with Cindy's brisk stride. We walk east on Farnham Street, past the 20s Club, which features female dancers, where Cindy picks up a flattened beer can. Friends here, and sorry to say it, use condoms too, she tells me. We hang a left on 72nd toward Dodge, and Cindy points out the worn bushes favored by the area's homeless. She has befriended a number of the men and women who ask for money and ask them politely to throw away their food containers and pop cans. Several now bag their trash and hand it to Cindy when they see her. At Dodge, we cross 72nd Street on a faded crosswalk that Cindy has repeatedly asked the city to repaint. No luck yet. We reach the bus bench on the south side of Dodge near 71st, where Cindy explains the bus bench dilemma. On one hand, the benches are great, she says, if you are waiting for a bus and want to rest your weary feet. On the other hand, the trash can here is always overflowing, making it about the least appealing spot to rest your weary feet. But Cindy is nothing if not persistent. Calls to Metro Transit, which oversees some bus shelters, and many phone calls to Omaha's Park and Recreation Department, which tends to oversee the benches themselves. She now knows whom to call when she sees an overflowing trash can or a particularly nasty bench. And when her calls didn't completely solve the problem, she created a new solution. She bought 3 giant trash cans with money she found while picking up garbage, and then she installed them near the area's dirtiest bus benches. Today she glides by and picks up a Diet Pepsi bottle half filled with tobacco, and an Almond Joy wrapper, and a Target bag, and a Dunkin' Donuts cup, and many other things. We turn around and walk west on Dodge. In front of DoSpace, Omaha's digital library, a man stops her and asks what she's doing. Trash, she says. Why, he asks. Because I want the city to look a little better, she says. Thanks, sir. Making the city look better isn't just about picking up trash, Cindy thinks. It's about allies, too. DoSpace and many other businesses in the area have joined a neighborhood business alliance that Cindy helped start. Now they meet and discuss ways to beautify the area, ways to put pressure on the city, and ways to get uncooperative businesses to clean up their buildings and parking lots. One person has a hard time getting things done, Cindy tells me, but what about a group? We keep walking west on Dodge towards 76th Street, past a natural light can and a used needle and other bus bench. Trash around this bench, and the bench itself is covered by a glass roof that's been shattered. Cindy picks up the trash, all of it, and makes a mental note to call the right people about the busted glass. I note that it looks pretty bad at this bus stop. It actually looks pretty beautiful today, Cindy says. A bus driver slows at the stop, opens his door, and waves at Cindy. The bus drivers like her, Cindy says after she waves back. They appreciate what she's doing. Then we head south again, completing this rectangle back toward Farnham. She picks up an empty pack of Pell Mell cigarettes and notes that several of the businesses here, including the Nebraska Furniture Mart and Lowe's, have responded to her requests about keeping their parking lots clean. Today, the Lowe's parking lot is all but spotless. Moving on, Cindy picks up more cans, more fast food wrappers, more plastic bags. And before I know it, we are back where we started. We have walked for 45 minutes. We have covered roughly 10 blocks around 72nd and Dodge. And in that time, Cindy has picked up an entire giant trash bag's worth of trash. It's a light day, she says. Usually she fills 2. In one memorable week last year, she picked up 200 gallons of trash. But the point to me isn't the volume. The point is this. Far too often we think we can't make any difference. We succumb to the idea that we are but one person in a metro area of nearly 1 million, a single person in an angry and divided country. And what can one person really change? Cindy does not think like that. In the past few years, she has formed a business alliance, cajoled several neighborhood businesses into cleaning their own parking lots, fought against city bureaucracy to ask again and again for city services she thinks the neighborhood deserves, and she's received much of what she has asked for. She has befriended her neighbors and rallied them to her cause of the beautification of 72nd and Dodge. She has befriended the panhandlers and persuaded some of them to beautify their small areas of the city too. She has advocated for change, everything from laws about when and where you can ask for money, to more social services for the homeless, to the elimination of problem bus benches. She has done all that, and she has picked up trash too. Today, 72nd and Dodge is undeniably a little cleaner, undeniably a little better, because Cindy Teft is looking out for it. So no, it isn't just the garbage, it's the underlying idea. It's the idea that Cindy thinks she can make a difference. It's the idea that she knows she can. There's still a little bit of nostalgia for 72nd and Dodge, she says, but today it's kind of like nobody actually likes it though. It can be such a difficult place, but it's my place. She's talking about our home base intersection, but she could be talking about Omaha, or the country, or the world. She's talking about herself, but she's talking to every last one of us too.
And this is John Rosemond's parenting column from the Journal Star. My advice to the Wall Street Journal, the only news source to which I subscribe: stop trying to be all things to all people. Specifically, stop giving parenting advice. The latest attempt by the Wall Street Journal to complicate parent-child matters is a November 7 article oxymoronically entitled "The Smart Way to Argue with Your Young Teen," in which the author, one Andrea Peterson, begins with the usual brain babble to the effect that neurobiology is the actual culprit when it comes to irresponsible teen behavior. Funny then that teens in the third world are not normatively stupid and irresponsible, nor were a significant number of American teens until relatively recently. Such specious babble profits the mental health and drug industries, not parents or kids. Therapists say argumentative young teens are healthy ones, Ms. Peterson goes on to say. Supposedly, parent-teen arguments are essential to forming a healthy identity, developing adult communication skills, and learning to separate. Two of the therapists quoted in the article worry when teens are not argumentative. Supposedly, the non-argumentative teen is holding vital stuff inside and not developing a healthy self-image. One babbler says that if parents don't allow arguments, teens will be susceptible to peer pressure to consume alcohol. In other words, rebellious arguments prevent rebellious behavior. To borrow from René Descartes, there is nothing preposterous that psychologists have not already thought of. I know teens who are argumentative and teens who are not. The latter are clearly the happier, more mature, goal-centered, responsible teens. Furthermore, they do not seem to be in any existential angst concerning who they are. The article goes on to recommend that parents handle parent-teen arguments by compromising on small stuff like goth makeup and clothes strewn everywhere. Concerning the former, letting a child dress like a sullen malcontent is the first step toward living with a child who is a self-destructive sullen malcontent. The operative principle, all big stuff starts as small stuff. Concerning clothes strewn everywhere, a child should be expected to maintain his or her environment in concert with parental standards. The difference between being a responsible family member as opposed to a boarder. My wife and I told our two kids, to make things perfectly clear, what you call your rooms are rooms in our house that we are loaning you. Space is neat and clean. How neat and clean? Just look around. If your room is not neat and clean, one of us will clean and straighten when you aren't home. In the process, we will open every drawer and throw out anything we think is unnecessary. It took one such cleaning per child to get them on board with the plan. Concerning arguments or the potential thereof, we told the kids that they were free to disagree with us, but they were not free to disobey. Respectful disagreement would result in negotiation, but not always. An argumentative, disrespectful attitude would not ever. In conclusion, I will point out that arguments between parents and children often lead to arguments between husbands and wives. You want a happy marriage? Don't argue with your kids.
'Tis the season for holiday markets, and both Lincoln and Omaha will be hosting events in the coming month. More than 50 vendors, including many vendors selling jams, jellies, candy, salsa, cheese, wine, and coffee, among other gifts, will be at the Xarban Village Holiday Market on December 3rd and 4th. The market will run both days from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. outside under heated tents at 67th and Mercy Streets. For more information, visit omahaholidaymarket.com. In Lincoln, shoppers will get multiple opportunities to shop at an indoor holiday farmers market. The Old Cheney Road Farmers Market will hold the events from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Sunday and December 4th and 18th at the Park Center's Banquet Hall, 2608 Park Boulevard. Farmers who grew longer into the season will be selling seasonal food for customers to eat through the winter. Vendors will have fresh vegetables, including salad greens, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, radishes, and root vegetables. Other farmers will bring artisan cheeses, dried pepper mixes, goat cheese, truffles, and braids of garlic, among other specialty items. For more information, visit holidayharvestfarmersmarket.com.
And now we'll turn to the day's business pages. Yesterday was a generally positive day for stocks. The Dow Jones Industrials added another 35.68 to 18,903.82. They're showing a gain of 8.5% year to date. NASDAQ Composite was up 39.39 to 5,333.97. It's up 6.5% year to date. And the S&P 500 added 10.18 to 2,187.12, a gain of 7% year to date. Oil for December delivery eased 15 cents to settle at $45.42 on the New York Mercantile Exchange.
Basic electricity rates would not change next year for the Omaha Public Power District's residential and commercial customers under a plan unveiled Thursday. The rate plan discussed by OPPD's Board of Directors and due for a vote on December 15th would be the first step in the directors' pledge to keep rates flat for 5 years after they voted in June to shut down the utility's Fort Calhoun nuclear plant. The plan shows reduced operating costs because of the October 24th shutdown. Next June, the utility is to begin buying power from the Grand Prairie Wind, a 200-turbine, 400-megawatt project being built in Holt County, Nebraska, by a division of Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated. The net result, OPPD's staff told the directors, will be enough revenue to operate without raising the basic rates. The rate plan doesn't change a fee increase adopted by OPPD's board last year. That will raise a fixed cost fee for residential and small commercial customers from $10.25 to $20 a month, starting January 1st, and eventually to $30 in 2019. Next year's plan also calls for spending $174 million in 2017 toward decommissioning the Fort Calhoun plant, starting with cooling the nuclear reactor's fuel rods. That's the first step in a process that could take 60 years and cost $1 billion. OPPD doesn't plan to borrow money by issuing bonds next year and would add $50 million to a reserve fund to cover unexpected costs, such as rising fuel rates. The utility would cut its capital spending from $172 million this year to $135 million in 2017. The projected result of the changes would be $66 million in net income for 2017. Counting the write-off of the value of the closed nuclear plant, OPPD lost $965 million in 2016. Shane Merrick, OPPD's chief nuclear officer, said the Fort Calhoun staff and other OPPD personnel performed at the highest professional standards during the shutdown. It was seamless, he said. Mark Sedke, manager of human resources, said 56 employees have been let go because of the plant's closure. All signed separation agreements that continued benefits, outplaced services, and severance pay based on salary and years of service. The biggest severance check was $145,500. Sedke said about 40 other employees have left or retired as a result of the plant shutdown.
Long-term U.S. mortgage rates climbed this week, reflecting deep declines in the U.S. government bond prices in days after Donald Trump's election victory. Mortgage giant Freddie Mac says the average for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage jumped to 3.94% from 3.57% last week. That put the benchmark close to its year-ago level of 3.97%. The 15-year fixed-rate mortgage, popular with homeowners who are refinancing, advanced to 3.14% from 2.88%. The rate rise was powered by a sustained decline in U.S. government bond prices in the days after Trump's victory became known early last week. Bond investors looked toward tax cuts and beefed up spending to upgrade roads, bridges, and airports under a Trump administration, which could fuel inflation. That would depress bond prices because inflation would override their value over time. And in Nebraska-related economic news, Cabela's has scheduled what will likely be its last annual shareholders meeting for December 13. The outdoors retailer will host the meeting at 8 a.m. that day at its Sydney headquarters. Cabela agreed last month to be bought by rival Bass Pro Shops in a deal valued at $5.5 billion when debt is included. The deal requires the approval of Cabela shareholders, but they will not vote on it at the December 13 meeting. The company said in a securities filing that a separate meeting will be scheduled for that vote. The two companies previously said they expect the deal to close in the first half of 2017.
Well, we're ahead of schedule a little bit. I think we're going to move to sports now since this is Friday and tomorrow, you know what day that is. Nebraska quarterback Tommy Armstrong's status for Saturday morning's game against Maryland may go down to the wire after the fifth-year senior didn't practice Thursday. Armstrong wore his jersey and a hooded sweatshirt to practice. Backup Riker Fife took all the snaps with the number 1 unit. Fife's backups are Zach Darlington, who has converted back to quarterback from his slot receiver spot, and Patrick O'Brien, a true freshman Nebraska does not intend to play because it wants to protect his redshirt status. Coach Mike Riley said he and trainers will evaluate Armstrong's status Friday and go from there. Later in his short press conference, Riley said a decision on Armstrong's status will be a combination of how he feels and whether he could further injure his hamstring. The hamstring is a mystery, Riley said. You really don't know until you really go, and then you can make it worse. We don't want to do that. We want to be pretty sure. That's why we haven't done much with him. Those things take time. He's getting a ton of rehab, all that stuff, so it'll be interesting. Riley said the expected cold temps for the morning game, it could be in the 30s or 40s at kickoff, might be a factor in whether Armstrong plays. Fife had a good week of practice, Riley said. I liked it a lot, as a matter of fact, Riley said. I was real excited, and it culminated in a real nice Thursday, which I consider a kind of dress rehearsal day. I thought he did a nice job today, threw some nice, sharp balls, very confident. The practice was crisp. The execution was good. I think the kids respond well to Riker. He's been around a long time. Fife started last season in a 55-45 loss to Purdue. He threw for 407 yards and 4 touchdowns in the game, but he also accounted for 5 turnovers. Fife's most extended game action other than the Purdue start came at Ohio State in relief of Armstrong. Fife did not play well, completing 5 of 18 passes and throwing an interception, but NU trailed 24-3 when he entered the game. In other injury news, center Dylan Utter will start Saturday after missing practice Thursday. He missed practice on Tuesday and Wednesday while recovering from an ankle injury suffered when Gerald Foster stepped on his foot. I-back Divine Ozigbo, who has 13 carries in the last 4 games while battling an ankle injury, looked as good as he has in 3 weeks, Riley said. Linebacker Dedrick Young is doubtful for Saturday's game because of an ankle injury. His backup is Marcus Newby.
From Charlotte, North Carolina, Cam Newton threw for 192 yards and a touchdown, and the Carolina Panthers held off New Orleans' fourth quarter rally to beat the Saints 23-20 on Thursday night in a game marred by injuries to key players. Newton was 14 of 33 and threw a 40-yard touchdown pass to Ted Ginn Jr. to help the Panthers win a third straight game and pull even with the Saints for third place in the NFC South. They now have a record of 4-6. Jonathan Stewart also ran for a touchdown, and Graham Gano had 3 field goals, but the win didn't come without a cost. The Panthers lost former NFL Defensive Player of the Year Luke Kulecki to a concussion, 2-time All-Pro center Ryan Khalil to shoulder injury, and defensive end Mario Addison to a foot injury, and cornerback Leonard Johnson to chest injuries. Cutchley left the field on a cart while tears streamed down his face. The Saints lost running back Mark Ingram to a concussion in the third quarter. The Panthers, who surrendered a 17-point lead and lost to Kansas City last week, entered the fourth quarter with a 23-3 lead before injuries set in.
From Lincoln, as Hannah Whittish drained a 3-pointer with less than 2 minutes left to break a 55-all tie, perhaps no one in Pinnacle Bank Arena was happier than Nebraska assistant Chuck Love. That's because every day in practice, Love tries to get the freshman guard not to pass up open looks or shake off opportunities to score. So when Allie Havers grabbed an offensive rebound and kicked it out to Whittish, she didn't hesitate and helped give the Huskers a 62-59 win over Colorado State on Thursday in their final game of the preseason WNIT. It was a great feeling, Whittish said about her 3-pointer. Once she rebounded it, I knew the shot clock was running down and the shot had to go up. You just have to go up with confidence. Whittish made 3 3-pointers on the night and finished with a season-best 10 points. I was proud of her tonight, especially late in a tie ball game, to be willing to step up and take a big shot like that, NU coach Amy Williams said. Coach Love will find ways to pump up that performance. Whittish wasn't the only Husker connecting from the deep. Sophomore forward Jessica Shepard added 2 3-pointers, including one that put the Huskers up 4 with 40 seconds left. Shepard, who didn't make a 3-pointer last season, said the new coaching staff has encouraged her to shoot from deep. I took it because it was part of the play. When we run the play, that's our second option, Shepard said about the last minute 3-pointer. It's definitely something I wanted to add to my game to make it harder to guard me.
Duke Catalan scored 3 touchdowns, and Houston's defense hurried and harassed Heisman Trophy favorite Lamar Jackson all night to propel the Cougars to a stunning 36-10 victory Thursday night that dashed number 3 Louisville's playoff hopes. Louisville, now 9-2, entered the game 5th in the college football playoff rankings, but was outdone by a Houston team that saw its own playoff hopes spoiled by 2 losses to unranked teams after a 5-0 start. Things went wrong quickly for the mistake-prone Cardinals when they fumbled the opening kickoff to Houston, now with a 9-2 record. Touchdown pass on the next play to make it 7-0. Brendan Radcliffe lost a fumble later in the first quarter, and Houston added a field goal on the ensuing drive to make it 10-0. Jackson threw for 211 yards and a touchdown, but it didn't come until the second half. Houston then scored touchdowns on 3 straight possessions in the second quarter to push the lead to 31-0 at halftime. Catalan caught a touchdown pass, ran for another score, and Houston got the third score in that span on a 50-yard pass by receiver Lionel Bonner after a lateral. Louisville opened the second half with a 12-yard touchdown pass by Jackson, but he fumbled in the red zone on the next possession to ruin a chance to close the gap. The Cougars were in Jackson's face constantly, sacking him a season-high 11 times and keeping him from hurting them with his feet. He ran for a season-low 33 yards after piling up 338 yards rushing combined in the last 2 games. After Jackson was sacked for the 10th time, he threw up his hands and 2 of his linemen looked to be yelling at each other about who was to blame for his latest takedown.
From Lincoln, on Monday morning, Nebraska seniors Dylan Utter and Brad Simpson drove back to Lincoln from Omaha. A Papillion La Vista grad and a Ralston grad, longtime friends, making the drive they had made so many times, only this one occurred at the beginning of senior week, which culminates Saturday in the final NU home game for Utter, Simpson, and 28 others. Utter and Simpson are on scholarship now, but they arrived in 2012 as walk-ons. They spent that morning drive reflecting on their 5-year journey, and because men sometimes consider their good fortune by pondering the other side of it, they talked about something else. The times we wanted to throw in the towel, Utter said, but you never wanted to let your boys down. They didn't. Neither did the rest of the senior walk-ons who made it to this point. Utter, Simpson, Sam Foltz, Trey Foster, Ross Zersey, Riker Fife, Graham Nabity, Brandon Riley, and Logan Rath were eventually put on scholarship. Others, such as Spencer Lindsay, Sam Hahn, and Jordan Nelson, are key contributors for the Huskers in various ways. The best of that 2012 class, Andy Janovich, has already graduated and plays in the NFL. Foltz, who died this summer in a car accident, will be on the hearts and minds of every Husker, but especially those walk-ons as senior day festivities commence Saturday morning. It is arguably the best single group of walk-ons in Nebraska history. I think it's made this team a bit more resilient, said Zuris, now a captain. We have a lot of leaders on this team. I don't think it's a few guys. More than anything, you're mentally tough, said Fife, who may get a rare start Saturday if fellow senior quarterback Tommy Armstrong's hamstring isn't healed. Even if you don't play, just making it 5 years at Nebraska and sticking with it. It's amazing, Simpson said. When I first came here, I never knew what was in store for me. I didn't know how things were going to pan out. I didn't know school-wise or anything. I came in blind. Now, as his career winds down, Simpson is committed to seeing everything. Back in 2012, the Husker walk-on class was put together by former Director of Football Operations, Jeff Jamrog. It was a large class, 19 players overall, and didn't include Rath or Hahn, who started their careers at South Dakota State and North Dakota State, respectively. In terms of high school accomplishments, talent, potential, intelligibles, and character, this group of 19 student athletes will have a great opportunity to make their mark in our football program, Jamrod said on signing day in 2012. Most of the walk-ons from that class played in the Shrine Bowl, a high school all-star game. Riley was the offensive MVP. Simpson, who intercepted a pass thrown by Fife and returned it for a touchdown, was the defensive MVP. There was a lot of talent in that game, and we were excited to get things started, Simpson said. Reality hit for most of the walk-ons once training camp started. In his first practice, Simpson surveyed all of the guys on the Husker team. He asked for bigger shoulder pads. I see all these guys walking around who were way bigger than me, Simpson said. So they gave me some larger pads. I still have the same ones. I grew into them. One walk-on immediately stood out, and not because of anything he said. Janovich, who turned down a UNK scholarship, was quiet. He didn't even participate in the summer conditioning program before training camp, but he made the 105-man roster and quickly became the team's starting fullback. He was kind of the motivator for everyone, Simpson said. He kind of kicked things off. Just a specimen, Utter said. He didn't need to say anything. You knew right away he was going to be a stud. And Foltz was Foltz. the gifted athlete, gifted at punting, gifted at friendship, gifted at being able to epitomize Nebraska. He was Five's close friend and top wideout during their Grand Island days, and he quickly became a central figure of the entire 2012 class, much less the walk-ons. He became Nebraska's starting punter by 2013. By then, he was already becoming a team favorite. He always had everybody in our class, all the walk-ons, he always had our backs. Juris said, he was so encouraging, and that's what we all wanted to be too. Simpson is focusing on these final moments as a Husker. Whether he's on the field, he may just steal or two and just reflect inside Memorial Stadium on his life right here in the present as a Nebraska football player. He didn't throw in the towel. Neither did so many other walk-ons. Senior day, tinged with sadness as it may be for Foltz's passing, is part of their reward. I've been soaking it in, Simpson said. Sometimes I'll be looking around at the environment. I'll look down and I'm wearing the uniform. I know this isn't going to last forever. I thought that last game in the fourth quarter, it was getting real loud. It was tied. I'm going to miss having this feeling, putting on this uniform, being especially around these guys.
And this is the No Huddle column from Steve Sipple in the Lincoln Journal-Star. Statistically speaking, is the headline, 5 of the 10 longest win streaks in the nation ended last week. The carnage included Washington at 12 games, Michigan at 10, Clemson at 9, Auburn at 6, and Appalachian State at 6. Alabama, of course, has the nation's longest win streak at 22, followed by Western Michigan at 12. And his upset alert for this weekend is Clemson at Wake Forest. It will be on ESPN at 6 p.m. on Saturday. The Tigers are 3 touchdown favorites, which seems like a lot of points considering their issue with turnovers, 21 giveaways on the season. Meanwhile, the Demon Deacons lead the ACC in turnover margin. And in Big Ten notes, Michigan's quarterback is improving. 2 days before number 3 Michigan faces Indiana at Michigan Stadium, Coach Jim Harbaugh said his starting quarterback, Wilton Speight, is getting better. Speight was injured in last week's 14-13 loss at Iowa and was not practicing early this week. The Detroit Free Press reported it was a broken collarbone. Speight was at Schembechler Hall on Wednesday and didn't have an apparent brace or sling, but his status for Saturday remains in doubt. Averaging 41 yards per punt, Penn State's Blake Gilkin has dropped 17 of his 47 punts inside the opponent's 20-yard lines, forced 15 fair catches, and has 7 kicks over 50 yards. More importantly, the Nittany Lions have won the field position battle in 8 of their 10 games this season and are forcing opponents to drive at least 76 yards on average every time Gillikin punts. The hidden yardage or the hidden parts of the game, a lot of people don't see that, special teams coordinator Charles Huff said.
Here's some more notes from NU football. Coach Riley said he thinks the senior day moment planned for Husker punter Sam Foltz, who died this summer in a car accident, will be sad but also special. It's perfect, Riley said. It's the way it should be. Riley said it would be significant for Nebraska to win all of its home games this season. The Huskers are currently 6-0. One of the factors that I've always kind of believed in, you can have a pretty good season if you win your home games, Riley said. That's a pretty good starting point. Jack Johnson, the 8-year-old profiled in Wednesday's World Herald, was part of practice on Thursday. Johnson, through Make-A-Wish, Nebraska, conducted a press conference earlier in the day and hung out with the Husker players, walking into the stadium with Armstrong. He also got a Husker playbook. For us to be included was a privilege, Riley said. It was great meeting the whole family.
And from also the Big Ten Conference, linebacker Vince Weigel attributes Wisconsin's success in the face of injuries in part to a refrain familiar in college football locker rooms across the country. What makes the 6th-ranked Badgers stand out is that they have thrived with the next man up philosophy. Tough as nails defense has been a constant this season in Madison, helping Wisconsin seize control of the Big Ten West Division. The Badgers, now 8-2 and 5-2 in the conference, number 7 in the college football playoff ranking, can ensure a trip to the league championship game by winning their final 2 regular season contests starting Saturday at Purdue. We have some unfortunate luck with players going down, but it goes down to the players that we have and the mindset they have to step in, Beigel said. A senior leader, Beigel has played for 3 head coaches. He loves playing for Paul Christ, a Madison native who has restored stability. While Wisconsin would love to collect 5-star recruits, the Badgers seem just fine with molding and developing less regarded prospects. I've overlooked at times the culture we have at the University of Wisconsin because it's just ingrained in you from day one. The precedent and standard we set here, Beigel said. It's not the 5-star, the 4 guys we don't get. It's the hard work in the off season, the dedication, the focus that we have. And that concludes our newspaper program for Friday. I'm Ralph Morocco. It's been a pleasure to read for you today.
And I'm Beverly Leidick, and we'll see you again soon.
And thank you both very, very